To the Davis Family Foundation for organizing this webinar. Our partnership with Maine goes back over 15 years, but we just met the Davis Family Foundation this past winter. So, as our schools were lobbying the Maine legislature for emergency funding, several of our schools searched for funding via other avenues, and many of them had reached out to the Davis Family Foundation. Stephanie took it upon herself to reach out to us to not only let us know that our schools had applied, but wanted to be a thought partnership to ensure any Maine school who wants to implement the BARR model can. So I first wanted to start off with a very heartfelt thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our story in Maine. So, we once again have been able to serve over 122 schools in Maine over the past 15 years, as well as BARR started initially in Minnesota, and Maine was its first school to adopt BARR, which you'll be able to hear more about. But we've been able to work with 122 schools in Maine, and once again, for over 15 years. And our research all began in the state of Maine. So we have deep relationships with the schools there, the districts there, the Department of Education, as well as the governor's office. So I want to do a little explanation of what BARR is. So BARR stands for Building Assets, Reducing Risks. It's a strength-based K-12 coaching and training partner with over a quarter century track record of raising student performances in both math and reading, as well as decreasing absenteeism, increasing teacher satisfaction and retention, as well as decreasing student discipline and suspensions. So, how BARR began was I was a high school counselor in a first ring suburb right outside of Minneapolis, and half the students failed a class for 5 years in a row. This does not inspire confidence into one's career choice. So I went to the principal at the time and said, I need to resign. Clearly, kids need to pass their classes. And he quickly reframed things and said, it's not me, it's not our school, it's a national average. And he said, I would love for you to come up with a different way. Well, when I looked around, I go, it's no way it's the students. The students are way too talented to be able to be failing a class. I also said, it's not my colleagues. My colleagues are incredibly gifted, they're incredibly creative. The issue has got to be the system we're trying to work in, that everybody is siloed and no one is connecting on anything. BARR always had an external evaluation, and it began from the very beginning. Our initial evaluator actually was SAMHSA, and it was looking at risk reductions. At the same time, we were building assets. With that, Rob, I'll have you explain a little bit more about BARR.
Thank you. There are two pillars that BARR emphasizes. The first is relationships. Relationships in a school can sometimes be hit and miss. In BARR schools, they're not. We build relationships on purpose. There are three different types of relationships that we focus on. Staff to staff, because we're going to be asking staff to do things they've never done before. Student to student, and of course, staff to student. Students need relationship. Relationships are the first required step to engage a student, and engaged students come to school more, get in trouble less, and perform better academically. This is why BARR schools show a decrease in chronic absenteeism rates, because relationships are built on purpose. The second key pillar is data. When we discuss data, we were talking about both qualitative and quantitative data. We bring teachers together across grade levels and across disciplines. So in the picture you see on this screen, if this was a high school, this could be an English teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, and a social studies teacher, all meeting to discuss students that they have in common. They're looking at their grades, their attendance, their discipline in all their classes, not just the classes they teach, but also their strengths, their passions, who's got the best connection with them at the school. They take everything they know about that student and they create a strategy for the student. Because BARR is a systems approach, every student is discussed in a school. Next slide, please. Now, after the great success experienced at the initial BARR school, the BARR team applied for and was accepted to participate in a evaluation process that was run out of the U.S. Department of Education. I tend to call it the American Idol of school. You had to apply and be accepted to be evaluated. And then there were different levels of the competition. First, BARR was evaluated at a large school in Southern California. Half the students got BARR, half didn't. And at the end of that first year, the BARR students did better in every way. They attended school more, they got in trouble less, they did better academically. Based on those results, BARR was passed to the second level of the competition, where we did 11 more of these randomized control trials where students were randomly assigned to either the BARR side of the school or the non-BARR side of the school. Same outcomes. The BARR students did better in every way. And based on that, we were passed to the final level. In the end, we did 78 randomized control trials across all corners of the country, and we're the only participant to complete all three levels of this competition. We had by far the best outcomes. And here they are: 21 statistically significant outcomes, 14 for students, and impressively, 7 for teachers. So along the way, we discovered that BARR was not only good for students, they attended school more, they got in trouble less, they did better academically, but also for teachers. They thrived in this new way of operating. Now, along the bottom of this screen, you can see that throughout this evaluation process, BARR was accredited by all kinds of organizations. We are the most evidence-based, successful school practice in the country. Next slide, please. Not only is this good for students when they're in school, but also when they're out of school. There's a group in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota that studied thousands of BARR students, 29,401 BARR students, who participated in this evaluation process that I just described. And they were looking at the financial benefit to the student. This group was interested in disrupting poverty across generations. And what they determined when they crunched all the numbers is that $1 invested in BARR resulted in a $13.58 benefit to the student. So a tremendous benefit to students as their math scores increased, as their reading scores increased, as their graduation rates improved, they derived financial benefits to themselves. Next slide, please. Now we'll dig into Maine. As Angie mentioned, BARR has been implemented in more than 100 schools in Maine. So we are now able to compare the Maine schools that do BARR with the Maine schools that do not. And this first slide is showing the results of elementary schools in Maine. Now, of those schools, 97% of the BARR elementary schools showed improvement in ELA, which is English Language Arts, or math proficiency. 100% of those schools showed decreases in chronic absenteeism. When you go to the right-hand side of this slide, we'll start at the top. These are the English Language Arts results. You can see the BARR schools over the period measured here. Their English Language Arts results improved by 3.7%, where the non-BARR schools in Maine improved by 1.9%. So the BARR schools did significantly better. Same story with math. The elementary schools that were BARR schools had a 5% increase in their math scores, and the non-BARR schools less than 1%. Chronic absenteeism, the lines go the other way, but it's the same outcome. The BARR schools showed a decrease in chronic absenteeism by 13.4%, and the non-BARR schools by less than 1%. The next slide is similar, but now we're focusing on secondary schools in Maine. The BARR schools, the BARR secondary schools in Maine, 93% of them showed increases in either English Language Arts or math. 94% of them showed decreases in chronic absenteeism. On the right-hand side, now we're comparing BARR to non-BARR secondary schools in Maine. On the top, you can see in English Language Arts, the BARR schools remained relatively stable, and the non-BARR schools showed an actual decrease in English Language Arts outcomes. In math, the BARR schools showed a 10% increase in math scores, where the non-bar schools showed approximately an 8% increase. And with chronic absenteeism, it's really evident here. The bar schools showed a decrease in chronic absenteeism, and the non-bar schools actually showed an increase in chronic absenteeism. Next slide, please. There are many highlights with individual schools in Maine. We'll just show you a couple of them here. This is Indian Township School. There was a nice article written about them. A school with native population, high native population, and they were struggling, not showing much increase for long periods of time. And after they started implementing BARR, big improvement. So this was a really nice article to see them getting credit for the great work that they did. Next slide gives you an example of a school district that has implemented BARR throughout all their schools. So at the Wyndham Primary School, amazing decreases of 50% in chronic absenteeism, high increases in English language arts of 35% and math 42%. At Jordan Small Middle School, amazing decreases in failure rate of 61% and chronic absenteeism drop of 19%. And at the high school, decreases in the ninth grade failure rate by 15%. Next slide, please. So we are working across Maine based on these outcomes. Many schools are reaching out to us saying, how can we do this? We are in over 100 schools in Maine, but there are many more that would like to do this. So we work with the State Department of Education and the legislators and the governor's office to do anything we can to help these schools be able to implement BARR as well. And you can see in the left-hand side of this slide, Pender Macon, who's the state superintendent of education in Maine, was on a panel at our BARR conference that we have every year. And on the right-hand side, we had several schools in Maine who testified in front of the Legislative Education Committee asking for this kind of support so that they could continue BARR and that many more schools could be able to implement BARR. Next slide, I'm going to pass it back to Angie.
So I just want to share how grateful we are to learn about the work that everyone is doing in your incredible state, as well as know that the need exists. And so although we went to the legislature, we were able to secure some emergency funds for this year, but looking for some paths forward. We have a lot of schools that are doing tremendous work with their same students and their same teachers, and they're getting better results. And with that, I really appreciate your time to learn about our work. Thank you so very much.